It's the Battle of the Big Apple as the New York Giants host the New York Jets in a Week 8 bragging rights showdown this Sunday. We're giving you everything you need to know about this big battle in this special crossover edition of Locked On Giants, Locked On Jets coming your way next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Hello, everybody. Welcome, New York Giant fans. Welcome, New York Jet fans. Well, to a special crossover edition, Locked On Giants, Locked On Jets. My name is Patricia Traina. I'm the host of Locked On Giants. And Jet fans, you know the gentleman to my side right there, Johnny B, host of Locked On Jets. And we are going to do a crossover edition. We're going to get you ready for this weekend's Battle of the Big Apple. We'll be talking about storylines, matchups, and predictions. And Johnny, this is going to be a good one.
It's great to be with you. We do this a lot. I'm glad we finally get together for a game. And you know something? This is something that may not interest a lot of people, but I was thinking through my Locked On history, and the first ever crossover podcast in the history of the Locked On Podcast Network was actually right after I started in 2016. I did a crossover right before Jets-Giants preseason game with one of your predecessors, and that was actually the first crossover show we ever had here. So we're kind of getting back to our roots today. Again, you and I might be the only people interested in that, but I was thinking about that before we started recording.
That had to be before I came on board. It might have been Art or it had
Art.
To be
It was Art. It was Art.
That was way back when the network was in its infancy, but that's kind of cool. You know, a lot of history there, as well as a lot of history between the Giants and the Jets. You know, the Battle of New York, the bragging rights, who's the big brother, or, you know, whatever angle you want to take, it's all good. And John, let's start off with the biggest storylines coming into this weekend's game. We'll start off with the Jets, the well-rested Jets coming off of a bye.
Yeah, and the bye came at like a very interesting time on the schedule for the Jets, because if you look at their schedule, the first 6 weeks were really hard. I mean, you look at the teams that they played those first 6 weeks. You started with Buffalo, then you had Dallas, then New England, who isn't that good but beat the Jets, Kansas City, then a game against Denver where, you know, again, not very good, but Philadelphia. So, I mean, 4 of your 6 games were against really tough competition, the toughest schedule in the NFL through the first 6 weeks. And I think it's obvious the reason they did it is because they wanted to load up on marquee matchups when they thought Aaron Rodgers was going to be the Jets quarterback. Obviously, Rodgers got injured. I think everybody knows that by now. Even when he was anticipated to be the quarterback, and I said this through the summer, the Jets' first 6 weeks was about surviving. I said, 3-3 would be a great start. Even 2-4, I think you could live with. And the Jets survived it with Zach Wilson at quarterback. And so now we've entered this kind of second phase of the season where they survived. And now it's time. The schedule has started opening up a bit. And it's interesting because before the season, sometimes you view the schedule, you break things down, and some teams are better than you expect. Some teams aren't quite as good as you expect. And while that's true on some level for the Jets, it really has kind of played out that the first 6 games look like the toughest stretch of the schedule the Jets have. And I mean, no disrespect to any of the teams they're about to play going forward, but the final 11 are not going to be quite as tough. I mean, there are some challenges in there. They still have their 2 games left against Miami. They still have Buffalo along the way. But this is the point where if the Jets are going to break this long playoff drought, they should have an opportunity to start banking some wins here, start going on a little bit of a run here. And, I think the biggest fear for the Jets was, if they got off to a 1-5, 0-6 start, especially after Rodgers went down, because that's the point where, things can just kind of sink. It can all fall apart for you really fast. And even if you get to a point of your schedule that seems relatively easier, the team might be gone by that point. And the Jets have avoided that fate. So I think, when you look at this situation right now for the Jets, there's a real opportunity because of how they played those first 6 weeks of the season.
And, to your point there, the Giants, that we don't want to hear it because you talk about a tough start to the schedule. look at what the Giants had coming off the 9-7-1 record and having four of their total five primetime games within the first 6 weeks of the season, including a Thursday night game at San Francisco, back-to-back, games out on the West Coast. Very difficult start to the schedule. So we know a little bit about something here in the land of the Giants. But, for the New York Giants, a very weird type of year, a lot of injuries right now. We still don't know as we record this whether Daniel Jones is going to be able to return. I'm not getting a warm and fuzzy feeling that he's going to be back for this game. The Giants are supposedly getting some reinforcements back on their offensive line, which has certainly been a topic of conversation. It won't be Matt Parrott, who's one of the backup tackles. He was placed on IR on Tuesday. I'm not sure if Andrew Thomas will be ready, although I think Andrew Thomas, the left tackle, will start to practice this week. This would have been a great week for Andrew Thomas to come back, especially against that Jets defense up front, which is very ferocious. But it's possible that the Giants get Evan Neal back, their right tackle, who's been dealing with an ankle injury. Now, to Giant fans, that's not a whole lot of consolation. I think if you were to ask everybody which offensive tackle do you want back, Andrew Thomas or Evan Neal, I think everybody would say Andrew Thomas. But the injury bug just absolutely merciless against the New York Giants. And, just going back to my point about Daniel Jones, the offense has looked pretty good being run by Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor a little bit more slippery, if you will, in the pocket, able to avoid some trouble that maybe Daniel Jones would get caught up with. Tyrod Taylor, faster decisions. That said, he only was able to score, 9 points against Buffalo, 14 points last week against a Commanders team, which they probably should have scored at least 10 more points. This Jets defense is a powerhouse. And for as good as Tyrod Taylor has played under center, it is a powerhouse. And just basically, we'll get into matchups a little later in the show, but I see a great mismatch between the Giants offense and the Jets defense. And then flipping that around, the Jets with Zach Wilson, he's still young. He's been playing fairly well, but the Giants defense is starting to click. They've been playing well the last 2-3 weeks. And the Jets offensive line, which I believe is still had its share of problems, I think the Giants can capitalize there with a little bit of luck.
Yeah, you would talk about Tyrod Taylor at quarterback. That's a guy Jets fans know well. He was the quarterback of the Buffalo Bills for a number of years. I was going to say the Jets know well, but I don't think there are a lot of Jets players who are left from the Buffalo days with Tyrod Taylor. But I remember him having some pretty good games against the Jets, way back when. And it's good to see the Giants get back on the winning note last Sunday. I think I was talking about sometimes. You have a decent team and it's just things kind of snowball on you. It just you have bad luck, and you talk about the Giants schedule and the Giants injuries, and it's not necessarily a sign you're a bad team. It's just there are years where things just kind of break against you. And we've been through plenty of those with the Jets.
Yeah, definitely. And the Giants, look, we kind of know what they are at this point. They're still rebuilding. Last year was they were able to catch people off guard, catch people by surprise, new coaching staff, some new players, and how were they going to set up the systems. But, this year, the injuries kind of muddled things up a little bit, but a lot of promise, on the Giants with some of the young players they have, both in the defensive secondary, the receivers, that young core of receivers that they're developing. And then, of course, Saquon Barkley is back in the fold, and he was a missing ingredient for the Giants for a few weeks there. He came back against Buffalo, the game a couple weeks ago, and he's really, a guy who stirs the Giants drink, if you will, with Daniel Jones out. So we're going to talk more about matchups on this special crossover edition of Locked On Giants, Locked On Jets. We'll get that to you right after this. Hey, football fans. So given my long hours spent covering the New York Giants for Giants Country and for Locked On Giants, there are some weeks that I just can't get to the grocery store to make sure that my fridge is full. Luckily, I don't have to, thanks to DoorDash. DoorDash brings me everything I want when I need it, delivered straight to my door. You know, for years, I've trusted DoorDash to also deliver freshly made meals from my favorite restaurants, and they've never let me down. And now that they've added grocery delivery to their offering, it's made my life so much easier. DoorDash has thousands of grocery stores to choose from, so you're sure to find one in your neighborhood that's right for you. You'll get what you ordered, or they will make it right. And you can save on all your grocery and restaurant favorites with a no delivery fee on eligible orders when you take on a Dash Pass membership. And now, for a limited time, you can get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to $20 when you use the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout. That's 50% off up to $20, no minimum subtotal, and zero delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter the promo code LOCKEDON. Terms apply. All right, everybody, welcome back to the special crossover edition, Locked On Giants, Locked On Jets. My name is Patricia Traina. I am the host of Locked On Giants. He's John Butcko. He is the host of Locked On Jets, and we're getting you ready for the Battle of the Big Apple. And in this segment, we're going to talk about matchups. John, what matchups are you keeping an eye on this weekend?
You know, I think on both sides of the ball, the answer is the same. I think it's the interior of both lines, the interior of the Giants defensive line with Lawrence and our old friend Leonard Williams against this Jets interior line of Laken Tomlinson, Connor McGovern, and maybe Joe Tippmann, maybe Wes Schweitzer. Tippmann was injured the Jets' last game against the Philadelphia Eagles. It's not entirely clear what his status is going to be. And over the next few days, Robert Saleh will offer some sort of prognostication. But one of the things Jets fans have learned the last 3 years is that what Robert Saleh says about injuries doesn't always pan out. There's actually kind of a running joke that a guy's going to miss a game if Robert Saleh says they're confident he's going to play on Wednesday. Saleh is frequently overly optimistic in his press statements about injuries. So Jets, could have some issues on the interior of this offensive line if Tippmann is out. But it's funny because I don't love this matchup for either offense. I think both defenses present a lot of problems with what they bring from the defensive tackle position. And I think on the other side of the ball, Quinnen Williams. Now, if you look statistically, he's not having anywhere near the impact he did a year ago, but I don't think statistics tell the story. I think he may not be playing exactly at the level he did last year when he was a first team All-Pro, but he's very disruptive. Even though the sack totals aren't quite there yet, he's generating pressures at a high rate. I think the sacks are going to come. And I think, that's a matchup that could favor the Jets against this the Giants interior offensive line. So, it could be a matchup of which interior defensive line wrecks the game more. And that could be one of the things that decides who wins this one.
Yeah, that should be an interesting one. The Jets have a really, really good defense, a defense that was actually striving to be historically great. So that's certainly one that that battle is going to be a really, really interesting one. The Jet defensive front versus the Giants makeshift offensive line. The makeshift offensive line for the Giants playing a lot better the last couple of weeks, which I think surprised a lot of people. But again, if they get some reinforcements back, hopefully it's Andrew Thomas. I don't think it will be, but if it's Andrew Thomas, maybe they luck out. The big matchup for me, from a Giants perspective, is going to be Saquon Barkley versus that Jets run defense. The Jets run defense, I believe, is giving up 135.2 yards per game, which is 26th in the NFL. So a little bit of problems there with the run defense, it looks like. Saquon Barkley coming off of that high ankle sprain. He's been back now for 2 weeks. Last week, he looked, a lot better than he did against Buffalo. Started to get back some of that explosiveness. I think Saquon Barkley, and I said it in the previous segment, he's going to be the straw that stirs the Giants' strength there. How he goes will be how the Giants' offense goes, and the Jets, they have a really good pass defense, so I think they should match up well against those young receivers. Jalen Hyatt, who's seeing more opportunities now, Wan'Dale Robinson, who's their yards after the catch specialist, and then Darius Slayton, who's one of their deep threats. And then let's not forget Darren Waller, tight end Darren Waller, who can shoot up the seam and create headaches and maybe draw a little party around him, which opens things up for guys on the outside. But for me, the big guy is going to be Saquon Barkley. And I would fully expect he's going to touch the rock a lot in this game.
If you want to talk about my favorite matchup of the game, I think the ones that we've mentioned are probably maybe more integral in deciding who wins the game. But I think the most interesting matchup for me is Darren Waller versus Quincy Williams, who's Quinnen Williams' older brother, who the Jets claimed him off waivers 2 years ago from Jacksonville, and he earned a starting job. He was okay, but this year he's had a breakout season. This year he's playing at a Pro Bowl level. He's been outstanding in coverage. I think that's just going to be a great matchup. I think another thing to watch again on the injury report is in week 6 against Philadelphia, the Jets were without both starting corners, Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, who were both in the concussion protocol. So we'll need to keep our eyes on that. As of the early stages of this week, neither had been cleared from the protocol. So, there's going to be a lot that's going to come out in the injury report this week that could end up, you mentioned some of the Giants offensive linemen. It's kind of difficult to prognosticate this game in the sense because we don't know exactly which Jets team and which Giants teams are going to be on the field on Sunday.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, we'll find out obviously Friday. Brian, you mentioned how Robert Saleh doesn't, quite give you accurate information about injuries. We go through the same thing with Brian Dable. He's always optimistic. He'll say somebody is day to day when in fact they're week to week. But before I forget, I've got to say thank you to the Jets for knocking off the Eagles, because you know that the Eagles is one of the Giants' biggest, opponents. They're in the same division, obviously, and they have just absolutely had the Giants' numbers. So when the Jets beat the Eagles, I think a lot of Giant fans were rooting for the Jets. So we owe you a big thank you.
You say the Eagles have the Giants number? That was the first time the Jets have ever beaten the Eagles in a regular season game. That was actually this. Every 4 years you'd hear about it. You'd hear, the Jets have never beaten the Eagles. So now we never have to hear about that again. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I'd like to start seeing the Giants beat the Eagles. I don't think it's going to happen much this year, but when the Giants can start getting, the Eagles on the ropes the way they have with the Commanders, then I would be happy. And that same holds true for Dallas too, who I believe the Jets also saw or will see at some point on their schedule. So NFC East versus the AFC East this year, which is why we're seeing each other. We don't get to see each other very often. But John, let me ask you something, getting back to matchups for a minute here. Zach Wilson has always been kind of an enigma for the Jets. A big question mark with, can he read defenses accurately? How does he respond to the pressure? The Giants defense, as I mentioned at the start of the show, has been clicking. Last week, they got 6 sacks against the Washington Commanders. What have you seen from Zach Wilson? And do you think he's better equipped now to handle the pressure that Wink Martindale, the Giants defensive coordinator, is known to bring against a young quarterback or against any quarterback for that matter?
I think he's better equipped. That doesn't necessarily guarantee that he's going to have success. I think there's no question Zach Wilson's a better quarterback than he was this time 1 year ago. Now, the bar is very low for that. Zach Wilson really struggled last year. He was benched multiple times. He's better at making his reads. I mean, one thing I'll say, and this is interesting because I think sometimes players come to the NFL and they're completely different from the player they were in college. And I think Zach Wilson is an example of that because in college, if you go back and watch what he did at BYU, he was a playmaker. He was a guy who was constantly breaking the pocket. He was making great throws on the run. He's evading pressure. In the NFL, when Zach Wilson's had his success, it's been when he's been able to get the ball out quickly, when he's been able to distribute the ball to his playmakers, making quick reads. Now he's inconsistent at doing that. There are times where he does it well. There are times where he doesn't do it well. But as far as, can he handle a pressure package, a blitz? He can do it better than he used to be able to. And, if you actually look at the splits, when he gets the ball out in under 2.5 seconds, his passer rating this year is over 100. When he holds the ball for longer than 2.5 seconds, his passer rating is below 50. So this is a sign that he's a guy the Jets need to build in quick hitting plays for. And if they do that, they can kind of help neutralize some of the pressure packages. So I think he's capable of doing it. I've seen him. There are moments where I've seen him do it. There are moments where I've seen him struggle, but I do think he's better equipped than he was in the past to handle pressure defenses.
Okay, well, that's certainly going to be a key for the Giants to rattle Zach Wilson because, Obviously, everybody thought it was going to be Aaron Rodgers, who, by the way, I believe is going to be at the game on Sunday. I guess he's been hanging around, coaching up Zach Wilson, coaching up his teammates. But Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson, two totally different quarterbacks, two totally different career paths. It's not to say that, Zach Wilson can't eventually be decent, but, so far kind of a rocky start to his career, as evidenced by the fact that they did go out and felt that they had to bring in an Aaron Rodgers to lead the offense as the missing ingredient. So, all right, coming up next, we're going to give our predictions and some final thoughts on the Battle of the Big Apple between the New York Jets, who visit, and I put that in quotes, the New York Giants. So don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back. Hey, football fans, snap into NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. This week, the New York Jets are a 3-point favorite coming off a Week 7 bye against a pumped-up Giants team that's coming up a 14-7 win over the Washington Commanders. Can the Giants beat the spread for a third week in a row? That's just one of the many bets that you can make on FanDuel's super easy app that allows you to bet on everything from the spread to player props and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get started. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Hey, football fans, you never know when an unexpected illness is going to strike. You could be away from home on vacation or get caught in the middle of a severe weather alert and not have immediate access to the treatment that you need. So wouldn't it be nice to know that you have an emergency kit stocked with medication that treats the most common and potentially harmful bacterial infections? Well, now you can with your very own personalized Jace Case. The Jace Case is a personalized emergency medication kit that contains 5 essential antibiotics that treat a number of common bacterial infections. You can also customize your Jace Case by adding other medications based on your needs. To get yours, just head to jasemedical.com, complete an intake form, and if warranted, jump on a call with one of their board-certified physicians to further discuss your specific needs. Once approved, Jace handles everything from issuing the prescriptions to having the medication shipped straight to your door. And right now, you can save $20 off your Jace Case with the promo code LOCKEDON. Visit jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com to get started. And don't forget the Locked On promo code to save $20 off your Jace Case. All right, everybody, welcome back to Crossover Thursday, crossover edition between Locked On Giants and Locked On Jets. I'm Patricia Traina, Locked On Giants. He is John Butcko of Locked On Jets. And John, it is prediction time. Is it going to be Giants Stadium on Sunday, or is it going to be Jet Life Stadium?
You mentioned it a little bit earlier. The Jets are technically the road team in this game. And I feel like this is the one matchup where you want to be the road team because it's not really a road game. You're playing in your home stadium, and it's not really a home game if you're the home team. So it's almost like it's like a bonus home, half a home game maybe, because I know when the Jets are the home team, there's always a lot of Giants fans in the stadium, and I'm sure there'll be a number of Jets fans in the stadium this coming Sunday. I think this is going to be a tight game. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think both teams, the defense is ahead of the offense right now. I look at this Jets team this year. I remember saying this 2 weeks ago when we did the preview show with the hosts of Locked On Eagles. This is a Jets team that's very much played to the level of its competition this year. They played really well in games against Buffalo. They played really well in the win against the Eagles. They played, even the game they lost to Kansas City, they played a really solid game after the first quarter. They had a disaster first quarter where they fell behind 17, and then were pretty much the better team the last 45 minutes of that game. On the other hand, they've lost to New England, and while they beat Denver, that game was closer than it should have been. Giants are an interesting team because I don't think they're at the top of the league the way like Philly or Kansas City are. I don't feel like they're at the level of Denver or New England, though. So the Giants are maybe a little bit more middle of the pack, probably closer to where the Jets are. I think, I don't think there's going to be a lot of offense in this game, which means it's going to come down to maybe a play here, a play there. I think, it's a field goal kind of game. And in a game like this, I'm going to pick the Jets. I think it's going to be really low scoring. Maybe I'm going too low when I'm saying it's maybe like a 13-10 kind of game. Maybe I'm not giving the offenses enough credit. I think the difference, though, is that the Jets have been excellent on special teams this year. If you look at by some metrics, they've been the number one special teams unit in the league. DVOA says that they've been. Greg Zuerlein has only missed one field goal attempt. They're in the top. They're in the top half of the top 5 or 6 in terms of punt coverage. The return game has been good for them, and I feel like in a game like this, a low scoring game where a lot of it's going to come down to field position. A lot of it may come down to a kick here. I feel like that might be enough to push the Jets over the edge. But I could go either way on this one. I think I'll lean with the Jets, but it might just be my bias speaking there.
Well, I don't think you have to worry too much about the Giants' special teams because they haven't been consistent. And last week, woof, that's all I could say about it. The Giants losing to Eric Gray, their punt returner, really wasn't, a threat. They tried Sterling Shepard back there. He didn't, he had a muff. The Giants don't have a punt returner that, we can say can flip the field for them. So special teams has been kind of a thorn in the Giants' side. Not totally, but for the most part, when it comes to winning the battle of the field position, that's been a big issue. For me, I'm going to actually say the Giants win this one. I think the momentum is on their side. They're feeling pretty good about the win over Washington. The defense, as I mentioned, has been clicking and playing really strong. I think that matchup between the defensive front versus that Jets offensive line, which is banged up, could be a problem. I do think it's going to be a low-scoring game, but I'm going to go Giants 17, Jets 13. I think it's going to be a one-score game. Zach Wilson, if they get to him, as you mentioned, he can be pressed into making some mistakes, and the Giants have just capitalized on that. So, both teams obviously with the offensive line questions, but the Giants have been settling down a little bit more at the offensive line to where I think they're going to be okay. And, again, as we record this, I don't know for sure if Daniel Jones is playing. I don't think he is. But I think regardless of who's at quarterback, if they get Saquon running and moving the chains and the Giants' defensive front can get to Zach Wilson and rattle him, I think there will be some plays to be made. And at the end of the day, that stadium will be lit up as Giant Stadium instead of Jet Life Stadium, which, by the way, I don't think that sat well with the Giants locker room when they heard about that. But just another piece of bulletin board material, I guess, for a game between two teams that see each other once every 4 years. So,
do you think that they're going to light up the Empire State Building also in the colors of the winning team? I know they've done that a couple times in the past.
They could. They absolutely could. It wouldn't shock me. I mean, last year, I think when the Eagles won, they lit it up in Kelly Green, which, irked a lot of Giant fans. And, I almost forgot the most important thing. No Taylor Swift won't be at this game, but Eli Manning will be at this game. So we'll see if Eli has a little bit of that Taylor Swift magic, like what she has had for the Kansas City Chiefs, who I believe are 4-0 with her in attendance. So we'll see if Eli can, work a little bit magic for the New York Giants.
Well, I imagine that the cameras at the TV cameras will show Eli less than they showed Taylor Swift when the Jets played the Chiefs.
Probably, but who knows? Maybe he'll sit in the same suite as she did, and I don't know. Maybe she left a little magic there. Who knows? But anyway, it'll be a great game. It's Sunday, 1:00, MetLife Stadium. New York Jets versus New York Giants for Battle of the Big Apple. Make sure you keep it here on Locked On Giants and Locked On Jets. We'll have plenty of coverage leading up to the game and after the game. So we want to thank you for tuning in, Giant and Jet fans, and hope you have a great time if you're going to be watching the game, which I'm sure you are. Enjoy the game. I'm Patricia Traina, Locked On Giants. He's John Butcko, Locked On Jets, and we will talk to you again on our respective shows tomorrow.